Greetings, listeners and viewers, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Accidental Farmer Podcast, the podcast that brings you the real dirt on farming. Today, I'm excited to to have as a guest someone who is an expert on dirt, or at least on ecology. Our guest today is Dr. Alex Njugi, an agroecologist, and I'm going to read his bio. Dr. Alex Njugi is an agroecologist, a sustainable food systems advocate. He's a leading agroecologist dedicated to transforming Africa's food systems through sustainable and climate resilient practices. With over a decade of experience in agricultural research and development, he's passionate about bridging the gap between scientific innovation and practical solutions for farmers. Holding a PhD in agroecology, Alex specializes in leveraging advanced technologies to enhance crop productivity while prioritizing environmental sustainability and social equity. His work spans collaborations with international organizations, research institutions, and farming communities to promote regenerative agriculture, food security, and climate adaptation strategies. Beyond his research, Alex is an advocate for knowledge sharing. He speaks at conferences, publishes thought leadership articles, and mentors emerging scientists. He also actively engages with the agricultural community on LinkedIn, which is where we met, I believe, where he shares insights and stories on sustainable farming. Welcome to the show, Alex.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you for the nice introduction. I'm really pleased to be here. It's a really nice program that you have. I've been following you, and I believe it's about time that we have this conversation about agriculture.
Thank you for the accolades. Flattery will get you everywhere, as they say. No, thank you. I'm very happy that we did connect on LinkedIn. And when I met you, saw your profile, I was a bit intimidated because I said a PhD in agroecology, and you've studied out in the West. I said, now, what does a podcaster? What is the minimum qualification a podcaster should have to interview somebody with a PhD in agroecology? Let's start. What is agroecology?
Well, I would say agroecology is just it's a mouthful name, of course, but it essentially means cultivating or practicing agriculture within the limits of our planet.
Okay.
So it's in the sense that we know we need to produce. We actually need to produce more because the population is growing. But how do we do that within sustainable limits? So it's actually just embracing and agreeing with the fact that, yes, we have this land and we only have one earth. We're not producing more of it.
Yes.
But we also need to have more intensive farming, be it crop farming, animal production. How do we engage in those sustainable practices?
Okay. So agroecology is very closely related to sustainability.
Precisely.
Yeah. And then all the buzzwords we hear, like climate action and, climate resilient. Is it climate resilient?
Yes.
All those words coming together under the umbrella of agroecology.
Exactly.
Okay.
And with sustainability, we have the three pillars. We are talking about the environment, of course, economic sustainability, and social sustainability.
Okay.
So roping them all together when you're doing all this that we want to develop.
So in terms of farming, tell me a little bit about the three pillars. How do they correlate in terms of sustainability when it comes to farming?
Exactly. So with farming, you are looking at number one, we want to produce food. But why are we doing it? There has to be an economic aspect because we need to, fill our pockets with these returns that we are after. But at the same time, the environment is what is enabling us to actually do this. So how do you produce and make sure that you'll be back the next season without having depleted all your resources, let's say nutrients in the soil or water bodies? How do you do that and make sure that you actually protect the environment? And the other one, not that it's the least, is the social aspect of it. So we are looking at, the youth, the women and all that, and even the communities that are around our production area. How do you do it in a way that actually cares about the society?
So it's the stakeholders or, Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good perspective. I've not looked at it that way. So for me, I describe myself as an accidental farmer, somebody who went into farming by accident. and I've had a series of accidents ever since. The economic is for me is I do not place more importance to any of them. I think they're equally important. But the one I think we struggle with first is the economic sustainability. How do we make farming economically viable? And that is what we try to do. But we also want to do it in a sustainable, because sustainability at the end matters. If we destroy our ecosystem or planet, then we cannot produce anything.
Yes.
But I like the fact that you also brought in the social, because that is often neglected. There are very many actors who are excluded in farming, because of owning land and things like that. But let's ask, how did you get into agroecology?
Yeah, I'd like to also say that it's also by accident.
Oh,
but this
so
just one aspect.
The accidental farmer meets the accidental agroecologist. Okay, there you go.
We can say that, yeah. But it's interesting because now I have a story that I've told a couple of times to my friend and my colleagues, is that I was actually deliberately running away from agriculture. Like, I knew this is probably not what I want to do. And I even dropped agriculture in high school. So you had this option of, choosing subjects. And I quickly went to business studies, which is, white collar and being in the office. Yeah. But then there's another behind the scenes story that I believe shapes me, because my late mom, she was an agricultural extension officer. So back in the days, I used to accompany her to farm visits. And, those back in the days, I'm talking about the 90s, agriculture extension officers were really, I could see they were respected people, especially by the farmers. They go by what they say. You need to cut down a tree. You have to have a signature from the agriculture extension officer. You're producing coffee, tea, and whatever. You get all this advice. So in some of those visits to the farm, I would accompany her and, tag along. And she didn't have a car, though some of these areas are remote. So we would walk several kilometers. And, halfway through the journey, I'd be like, did I really want to do this? In the scorching sun and, rough terrain.
Yeah.
But anyway, then we'd get to farmers and I would just, be at the back listening to her, explaining to the farmers what they need to do. And you could actually see the face of the farmer as she's listening to this agriculture extension officer. And yes, I do that. Last time you told me this and it has given me this. So you see that satisfaction, you see that fulfillment from the farmer. And so that kind of stuck with me at the back of my mind, even though, just seeing the toiling and the walking was not appealing to me. Well, that's why probably I decided, let me try something different. But, fast forward, I dropped agriculture, then specialized in chemistry for my bachelor's. So I did analytical chemistry. But after, going through the energy sector and pharmaceuticals, I somehow found my way back in agriculture, still in the lab doing chemistry, but for the greater good of agriculture. Okay. And at some point I was like, so we are going out to farmers and they're asking, well, you did soil testing and all this chemistry background, you have all this data, but what does it mean? What at the end of it, what does it mean for my crop? So there was this gap that I saw between my profession as chemistry, but also what needs to be done beyond that. And that's when I realized that, you know what, I have chemistry, but also ultimately agriculture will solve all these questions that we have about feeding people. And it gave me joy to see creation within the farming sector.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you were a normal young person running away from agriculture like most youth do, but you found your way. It's interesting. We've had other guests on the show. One of my previous guests stated that she became an agronomist because I think her mother or one of her parents was also in agriculture and an extension officer. So there's this influence that we have from our parents that we don't seem
Absolutely
to think has an impact on us as we grow.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm hearing the same thing now. So you went into this through, as you say, chemistry, sciences, and then the linkage came in with soil testing and all that. But you also then furthered your studies beyond your first degree and took it even further.
Exactly.
Explain that a little bit. And you even went out of the country to get subsequent
yes.
degrees.
Yeah.
Was the love that great, or did you just see a niche or something that you could extend further? You had a deeper yearn for more knowledge. Tell us a little bit.
Yeah, it's definitely that, but also this curiosity to get more knowledge and add skills into what I already had as a platform. So my chemistry background, working in the agricultural sector as a chemist, of course, gave me this wide pool of things that I could do. But there was also a huge gap in terms of translating what we are getting in the lab to actionable things in the farm. So I was also lucky that I got a scholarship to go pursue a master's in Australia at the University of Sydney.
Okay.
This was great because it was also engineered from a collaboration between the Kenyan government and the Australian government.
Yes.
So they have this wonderful scholarship called Australia Awards Scholarship, where people from different sectors get opportunities to go and study in Australian university. So I went to the University of Sydney, focused on agriculture and environment. And that's where my journey with agroecology started, because my master's was focused on agricultural and environmental technologies.
Okay.
How do you practice both and embrace technology to actually produce more within sustainable limits? And then from there, I've always been a huge advocate of trying out things that you get abroad back into my home country.
Yes.
So I came back to Kenya, but that didn't last long.
Okay.
I stayed for about 10 months.
Mm-hmm.
And another opportunity arose to, pursue further my education.
Mm-hmm.
This is where I got an opportunity to study a PhD in Denmark at Aarhus University. And again, this was also another interesting opportunity because I had an intersection between industry, hired by a company in Denmark, that also looking at sustainable farming. So it was a collaboration between a university and a private company.
Okay.
And this also brought these great learnings where you're kind of practicing what you are learning as a researcher, but also putting it in action in industry.
Yeah.
Which is something that I think we can gain a lot even back here home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that business education alliance can be very beneficial, because many times we look at academia and say that they're in their own silos.
That's true.
But we want things that are applicable to the world outside of that.
Yeah.
So that was a good thing.
Yeah.
What were some of the challenges you faced when you went abroad to study these things? Because I'm sure when it comes to technology and innovation,
yes,
they might not be more advanced, but they are at least very different. And what are some of the things that?
It's a couple of them, and especially if I focus on my PhD journey was. You're going into a developed country, so the mode of learning and teaching there is, I would say, a little bit advanced, where you're kind of embracing technology and information, how you're getting it. So sometimes you find yourself a step behind, but you also have to catch up, and then you have to find your own way of knowing these things and moving fast. Being abroad also has its own challenges. You're excited in a new country, but then you soon realize that, well, after all is said and done, this is not home. You also have to, find your way of keeping yourself motivated and dealing with homesick. And also the fact that you have this, and most PhDs will tell, like 90% will tell you of this big term that we call imposter syndrome.
Yes.
Where everybody is looking on you as the researcher who should be knowing how to navigate their way through the forest and find these, groundbreaking innovations. But deep down, you feel like, am I really cut out for this? So those are some of the challenges, but you find your own way of dealing with them, moving and finding your own momentum and actually making it through.
And indeed, you did deal with them, and you completed your studies. PhDs are one of those programs that I hear many people start, but never quite complete. Life gets into the way. Life gets in the way, and then But you did it. Congratulations.
Thank you.
What are some of the key takeaways from your time abroad? Because you said that you're a big believer in transferring the knowledge that you gain from other countries or other environments and bringing them back home. What are some of the things that you did gain from your time in Australia and Denmark?
Yeah. So one thing that's common between Australia and Denmark that I noted, especially with learnings and how they practice farming and all that, is data Data.
Okay.
Very important. There's also another research center that I came to know about in Cambridge, in the UK, that they have these research programs running for more than 100 years. So doing over and over and learning from that. So, and then not just keeping this data somewhere in a cabinet, but using it to improve subsequent learnings. That was one key area that I saw we could even implement here, or baby steps as we go. But also this way of looking at projects at the end product. What do you need? And then embracing in project management, they would call it agility. How do you make these small improvements and move on? So working at a company and a research institution, it's where you see things that you are trying in real time being tested on the ground there and then. And that's where you get all these learnings that can improve, number one, your research, and number two, also what the industry is trying to achieve.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So it's a lot of it is data driven. You learn from, you see the impact of data and how it's applicable to industry.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about an area that you may have, that I believe you have specialty, and that is in soil. Because agriculture is about, ecology is about organisms and how they interrelate and soil. I have been a farmer I've had 2 stints in farming, but I'll talk about when I talk about my latter stint that I'm still going through and I'm trying to figure my way out. But it took me a number of years to realize the importance of soil and soil health. And when I talk to a lot of farmers of my ilk, farmers like me, I noticed that when we farm, we pay little attention to the quality of soil or the medium in which we're using to plant on. We just jump right in.
Yeah.
We go and we buy the seeds. Yeah. We ask what the inputs are. We can come up with a planting cycle.
Yep.
But we kind of, we're always told, do a soil test.
Yeah.
But we're very reluctant to do so.
Yes.
How important is soil health as a field to you or to farming?
This soil is the foundation of everything.
Yes.
So if I was to define, like, soil is the genesis of all this production.
Yes.
Be it crop production, animal husbandry, soil comes first. It's the basic unit. So there's no way you neglect a basic unit. And I try to equate this to human health.
Yeah.
You know how you go for a checkup, or your body feels like ish, and you go to the hospital and the doctor checks you up and tells you, you need to add these supplements, just this medication. Yeah. So with soil is the same. When you're planning on production, I think the most important thing you need to start with is where I need to plant these crops. Can it sustain them? And there's a term called soil security that has 5 main aspects. We call them the 5 C's. So number 1 is capability, capacity, capital, connectivity, and codification. Okay. Among those 5, they're all important, but the condition and the capacity tells you how is the fertility, what is the soil structure, what is the texture, what is the pH, is the soil organic matter enough? Can it actually buffer my soil in terms of pH to ensure that the nutrients that are there are available? But then you also have another important aspect, which is now what we are all talking about, climate change. And that comes from the capital, the economic and social value that you place on the soil. Carbon sequestration. Is the soil able? Does it have the capacity to actually store the carbon? So I'll tell you a very interesting fact that the top 1 meter of the soil has the capacity or stores twice the number of CO2, carbon dioxide, that's in the atmosphere. So if you are turning all this land into, for example, forest land, and then you cut all the trees and turn it into, could be, and now it's a dicey topic because people need to produce. Yeah. So if you turn that into something else, so you cut down the trees, so what you're doing, you're actually removing all this carbon that's stored into the atmosphere. Yeah. And that we know all these repercussions that we have. Yeah. Codification also deals with policies. What policies are there that regulate how we use this soil? Are we changing our soil from a productive agricultural land or a very nice store for carbon and turning it into something else that probably does not have much benefit in terms of sustainability? So it's more of you looking at soil security in the sense of how does the soil function, but also more importantly, can it support what you need it for? In this sense, we are talking about crop production. So before you apply fertilizer, why are you applying fertilizer? Probably your soil doesn't even need this fertilizer. It already has enough of its primary nutrients, NPK, and so you need to know what's the status before you can make any amendments.
Now I understand why we don't take soil health very seriously, because people argue, even in our own health, how many of us really go for medical checkups?
Exactly.
But when we talk about, especially for men, if you talk about their vehicles, for example,
service,
any sound, and we take action. And maybe that's the same attitude we should have when it comes to soil.
Exactly.
And to soil testing.
Yeah.
So I plan, my next project is to grow sweet yellow passion fruit. And I want to do it on a pilot. I was taught that I should start things slowly after getting burned from doing things in a big way. So I want to do it only on half an acre. And where I'm growing this passion fruit is in an arid and semi-arid and ASAL area in Athi River. What are the first 3 things I should do before I buy the seedlings? What should I do before I start?
Well, it's nice, and from an economic perspective, I would guess probably you found a market for this yellow passion, or
yes, we have a market. That's a good point. We have a market, and the market is actually, we are converting this passion into a product. So we want to, because of traceability and because we want to create a certain taste, we want to control
quality.
The quality. We want to actually grow the passion fruit ourselves.
Great.
Rather than aggregate it.
Yes.
And if we do aggregate it, we'll then talk to other farmers and tell them this is how we'd like you to grow it for us.
And I guess that's the first point, that you need to know where you're taking this product.
Yes.
Value addition even better.
Yeah.
Then you also need to know, where am I growing? What are the resources that are there?
Okay.
So the soil, like we said, is it capable of supporting this passion fruit?
Yes.
And if not, what can I do? Sometimes it could be like, well, as it is, there's very high sodicity. You need to, apply things like gypsum or this kind of soil amendments.
Okay.
So know your soil, but also the resources that are available, the climate that's in the region. Are you doing it open and relying on rain-fed, or are you irrigating, or are you making greenhouses? So, and this will actually help you to define your input cost, so that when you're selling your product, you know what you need to first cover to break even and even have something for economic sustainability.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you brought up the market. The market is critical. The environment in which we're growing, and then the soil itself, right?
Yeah.
That's very important.
Your primary input.
Why do we bypass that? Why do we jump in? Is it because of the pressure that we think? Do you think that we think farming is easy or easier than it is?
That's a good question, because there are so many reasons why one would get into farming.
Yeah.
Probably you saw someone do it and they were, quote unquote, waliomoka.
Yes.
But it could also be that you're so passionate about farming that you really don't even care about what am I going to say. You just want to do it, and it's therapeutic for you.
Yeah.
So that's why you have people having kitchen gardens. They're producing for their own. Well and perfect. It's a hobby they do after work or as a side hustle. But I guess the most important question would be, is there continuity? What's the end goal? Like you said rightly, I want to start small. Maybe you start small, gain good insights, scale up, expand it, and that's growth, which is beautiful.
I'll make reference to another guest who came and told us that he doesn't know of any small-scale farmer who has grown a single crop for more than 3 seasons, which tells you how we are. Huh? We want to strike it big on the first try,
go.
which is rare, and therefore there's very little consistency from the market. And then when we talk to the people who are in the market, the vendors the off takers, the people who buy our produce say, Joe, last season you're growing onions. I don't get onions from you anymore. I said, oh, no, now I'm doing capsicums.
Yeah.
Crop rotation and all we understand, but that kind of consistency in a product, is it because we don't take some of these factors as seriously as we should, like the soil and the sustainability?
It's a good point, because when you get into farming, there of course like any other business. Actually, there's interesting statistics about the number of companies that succeed as startups, and agriculture, it's no different. It's a business.
Yeah.
So the level of success that you get in any business has to do with how are you learning, how are you supporting it, because you get into farming like any other business, you need to support it, getting the learnings that from the previous harvest, get completely burnt, but you learn something, get back to it. This sort of resilience, very key when you're getting into farming. But also, how you don't really have to, of course, you learn from your own mistakes, but you necessarily don't have to learn from all your mistakes. You can learn from other people's mistakes, right?
That's
and you avoid
it's
that.
a lot cheaper.
Exactly. Very cheap.
Okay, so sorry.
I made that reference because also there's also this fancy aspect of I'm doing farming as a side hustle.
Yeah.
And I think that's a limitation by definition, because it's okay, well, some passive income, but I don't think it's passive income, because you have to really get involved. You have to learn. I myself have my own experience with farming, and I got really, really burnt.
Really?
Because
and
I was
a PhD in agroecology.
I tell you, I tried doing telephone farming, and it didn't go really well.
Yeah.
I got my own lessons, probably not as much as I would have if I was really on the ground, hands-on.
Yeah.
But we need, by definition, to actually look at farming as a main hustle. Then you will be able to, make calculated risks.
Yes.
And then watch your things like a hawk.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to minimize your input cost, but also maximize production and learn as you go forward. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense if you do it like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we should make farming our main hustle. Get away from this side hustle mentality.
Exactly.
Yeah. When we were talking earlier, aside from this, you mentioned something. We talked about the youth and farming. How can we get the youth to be interested in something as seen to be as mundane as farming?
As farming. To start off, I'd like to define or introduce myself as a youth. Even though I crossed the youth mark this year.
Oh, you did that?
Yeah, maybe I'm 35.
Okay, so
going to 36.
But according to the UN, I think you're still youth.
Oh, perfect.
It kicks it for another 5 years, from what I hear. But yes, 35 in this country,
Great. Then, so youths, they are an interesting category of the demography that we have. And I think a big aspect of motivating the youth to get into farming would be, sharing stories about experiences in farming, but also integrating. And we actually don't have a choice. Farming has to go technology way. You need to embrace technology into farming. But then another thing that's quite critical is access to this land that we want to farm. How do the youth access land without necessarily having the initial huge capital cost of owning land? Of course you can lease, but can the government also intervene in terms of providing idle land that lies and youth groups that have a common goal accessing this land? Another thing that could also be quite, twin benefit would be agritourism, where you sort of show the youth how, it could be fun to get your hands dirty and watch things grow, watch production happen in the farm. And because the youth are really out there, especially on the internet, on social media, they also need to see that this makes economic sense. And that's where, I can see the trajectory even in our country, where we are going e-commerce way, where you actually, market your produce and embrace this online marketplace where the youth can find markets and then be motivated to do that production.
Yeah, and I hear that a lot, that the way to get the youth interested in agriculture, or one way to get them interested in agriculture, is through technology. because they're already into technology.
Exactly.
If you can use technology to get them into farming, then that's a gateway. However, this is what I question. Many, this agri-tech is an emerging but how much is it really helping farmers? Because when I look at agri-tech, I see, people coming up with products like SAPs, things that can help farmers improve, how they run their farms. That's one thing. Or they come up with markets saying that you can advertise your produce here, we'll find you buyers.
Yeah.
But does that really help the farmer? Because some of the, that's what I'm saying. How does the technology really assist the farmers as it is now?
Yeah, you also have to be careful because then, of course, with technology, there's a lot of fallacies and fantasies about how you can do this kind of farming. I don't want to go way back to the quail farming business, but exactly. Yeah. So it also needs to be informed. There has to be a lot of networking, and there has to be a lot of really market searching and soil searching to find what do I need to grow and what's the market for that. I mean, it all boils down to where do I take my produce. Otherwise, that you're only doing it for a hobby, and then that's just throwing money into something that you just love doing. Yeah. But yeah, another point is that the youth are ready. I believe they are ready to be engaged into, stuff that will engage them completely, make them money.
Yes.
But it has to really come from a point of, is it something that has this continuity, or am I just trying it for a couple of months as a, something to wait on to something else?
That's right.
Yeah. Exactly. It has to be really intentional into it. Technology, if I may go back to it, we are in the age where I don't need to wait for the meteorological department to tell me when I will get these rains or when it's going to dry. I was the other day when we had a bit of rain for like 2 weeks. I was looking at this app on my phone, Google. It's called Zoom Earth, that relies on satellite imagery information, and it gets really accurate. So you have
technology. You could tell that the rain was going to come.
Exactly. And when you have this kind of information, of course, we know climate change is happening.
Yes.
So we are far from the age where we know it used to rain this time, and Christmas was always rainy. You have this information on your hands, and you can use it to make insightful decisions to produce.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So we have a lot to leverage on, and I think the youth who have already embraced technology can do it in terms of knowing what's best to farm, and then using the e-commerce and internet and marketplaces to actually connect with people and find ready markets that are already happening.
What exciting trends, now let me shift gears to the continent. What exciting trends are you seeing in agriculture in Africa? What are things that are coming up?
So if I was to use the developed world as an image or as a extrapolate to see where we are heading, there are cool stuff happening in agriculture. And I already said one is technology, which is also driven by data and how we are using this data to make future decisions. And then we see these, things like drone technology. So we are talking about reducing your input costs, applying things like fertilizers and pesticides using drones. So you're eliminating all these heavy mechanized tractors and all. Using satellite imagery, things like vegetation index and precision farming. So you're coming from a knowledge where you're not just applying nutrients or applying input like pesticides, blanket. So we call it blanket application, but it's very targeted.
It's precise,
very precise. Yeah. I need this much of nitrogen in this area of my land, which is different from that based on production. So you end up not overspending, or you end up not overdosing fertilizer or underdosing, because then you get a penalty in yield if you don't supply as much as is required. And of course, then you would ask, is it really practical to apply for small scale farmers?
Yes.
Probably not. That's
Oh.
huge capital
And that's
application.
economies of scale, eh?
Exactly.
Yeah. In order to recoup the capital investment, you need to grow on a certain
Yes.
size
Yes.
of land.
Exactly. But then there are ways around that, because I think for you to get maximum benefit from these farming activities, the farmers also need a voice. And I've seen in these countries how they're doing it is that farmers actually have a say in what research is being carried out by government-based research projects, because at the end of the day, it's taxpayers' money. So
Yes.
they have a voice into what is being researched on.
Yeah.
If we are growing this type of crop, we need to improve probably its resilience to climate. Then money should be put and get results from these research activities applied back into the farm. So levies that farmers would be paying, some of it is being directed into forward-looking research. And when you have this kind of partnership where the industry is connected with research, then real solutions are found. But of course, there has to be constant communication. And if there's one thing I want to be known for in this setup in Kenya and in Africa, is actually forcing industry and research to talk. Because if they do, then policy will come later, and it will find people who are already talking, and they only need to enact things to remove bureaucracies and enable things to move smoothly.
And how do you intend to do that?
Oof.
That's a very lofty goal.
I know. But at least there has to be that advocacy
Yes,
kind of thing.
yeah.
You need to talk to the right people, both in industry and in research,
Yeah.
bring them together, and actually show,
and government as well. Eh?
Yes.
Yeah.
One thing with researchers, well, I have a PhD, so I would consider myself a
You are a
researcher,
researcher, yes.
is that we have difficulty communicating, pertinent issues, because we're all about data and stuff, graphs and everything. But how do you package that information into something that an industry person would be interested? And the industry has money, so they will fund things that they see potential and output. But we have a big problem as researchers communicating that to industry and also to policy.
Some of the things you talked about in terms of precision farming and in the technology affecting or influencing how we're doing things, these are things you're seeing happening across the continent, not only in Kenya but in other countries in Africa.
Yep.
Okay.
And it's about time, because, like I said, we have all these tools. We have AI. We have technological
weather predictive.
Yes.
Technology and things like that.
So they're out there. It's how you leverage them, and because of this also globalization and technology transfer from one point to another, it has to happen, and it has to find its hand. It has to find its hands on the right people, and people who are willing to leverage it and use it for maximization.
Do you find that is also applicable to small-scale farmers? Do you see those same opportunities for small-scale farmers in Kenya?
Absolutely. And, agriculture, at least in Kenya, about 70% is small-scale farming.
Yes.
So they have a voice if this voice was consolidated. And some of these technological innovations or trends that we are seeing, of course, you might say it doesn't make sense if every small-scale farmer is owning, a drone or these expensive technologies. But if they come together, aggregate from the input perspective, but also from the output perspective, then there's huge opportunities for them accessing this technology and innovation. And it also comes from a point of knowledge. So you're doing one thing, I'm doing the other person is doing a different thing, but there has to be some sort of coming together so that they have this negotiative muscle.
So small-scale farmers should try as much as possible, especially in certain in the communities they are in, to come together.
And there lies the answer. Coming together, aggregating, and you don't have to be growing the same crop. You don't need to be producing the same product, but actually you're coming together in terms of a common goal to fund your agricultural venture, but also to dictate what's happening in research and in the market. Yeah.
What do you see as the future of farming in Kenya?
Well, Actually, I would say the future of farming in Africa, because
Okay,
we are a very rich continent, probably number 2 in terms of arable land, but number 1 in terms of the potential or the untapped arable land. Africa will be feeding the world. So what that means is that critical steps have to be made now in terms of how do we support agriculture? How do we zone our agricultural land? How do we protect it? How do we regenerate it?
And this starts at the policy level.
It starts at the policy level, and the government, and also how we are partnering with these other countries. And I can already see trends and indications. It has been there, but there's a big push from these developed countries to actually themselves come and produce in Kenya and in Africa.
Okay.
So, and then again, there's also this other thing that we are also trying to, as researchers, policymakers, to digest about carbon farming, carbon credits. What does it even mean? But there's potential, because we have the capacity, we have the land, we have the, even going organic, but we actually even have the potential to be paid to produce, just because we are addressing issues of climate change.
Yes.
Capturing the carbon, sequestering it in the soil, based on the farming practices that could be done. So it's really interesting, and of course the population is growing. People will be feeding more, so sustainability has to be the key question, and it's also the key answer.
Alex, thank you. A lot of what you've talked, you're an academician, but you've broken it down in a way we can understand. I think some of the key takeaways, and we'll put them in the show notes. One was the 3 things of the sustainability. I like that, the 3 pillars. On the soil, you said the 5 C's. Repeat that for me before we close.
So the 5 C's of soil security.
Of soil security, yes.
Capacity, capability, capital, connectivity, and codification. Yep.
Okay. I see those are the takeaways. Do you have any other takeaways? You gave us a lot of nuggets. Do you have any other takeaways you'd like our listeners and viewers to have before we close?
For sure. I'll go back, because soil is what I do. Soil is my thing. Know your soil. Before producing, know your soil. Don't shy away from testing. Actually, the general rule of thumb is that you should test your soil every 2 to 3 years. If you're continuously practicing, but also if you want to go precision, you even need to do more. What soil testing will do for you is that it will save you a lot of headache, because I'm not saying it's everything, but actually it's a start. Before you go looking for this input pesticide, or I don't know, foliar fertilizer, did you start from basics? Do I have all the nutrients that I need? And by the way, soil has more than 14 parameters that you actually need to check for you to define its fertility status. So test. And part of what I was doing for my research was finding new ways of testing soil, moving from the conventional methods where you're told, wait for, 10 working days before you can get your result, to a situation where you can get the status of your soil in a couple of minutes.
And that's readily available? That can happen?
That can happen.
There are people doing that?
There are people doing that.
Okay.
My specialization was in spectroscopy.
Okay.
It's I wouldn't say it's a new thing. It has been there, but it's even advancing more in terms of agricultural applications.
Okay.
So there's a huge potential for, I'm not saying it will completely replace conventional testing method, but it's a way to use it to scale how much we can test within reasonable turnaround time, and also at a cheaper cost.
Okay.
So you need to, if in Kenya, we need to map out our soil from north all the way to south, east, west. Spectroscopy is the way to go, because you can quickly know the status from different region profiles, and then policymakers, agricultural stakeholders can use that information to actually recommend what to do in different parts of the country.
I have 2 more questions before we wind up.
Yep.
So when you've told us about soil, I like the thing of was it 1 meter deep, or what was the thing you said?
1 meter deep.
1 meter deep.
Yeah.
So tilling or no tilling?
Oh.
Should we then plow, or is the plow an outdated tool that
Uh,
is the cause of all our problems?
it's a dicey question.
It is. It's
It is
controversial. They're very different schools of thought.
Exactly.
But I would like to hear, take a safe, give it to us in a safe, in a diplomatic answer. We'll not hold you to account.
So I think it also boils down to priority.
Okay.
So when you go, say, minimum tillage,
Yes.
or
We've got-
I
we've
like
got
to use
we've
minimum
got from
tillage.
Zero, yeah, we've got zero tillage.
Yeah.
At least a continuum. Then we have some people say minimum tillage.
Yeah. I'm not a big advocate of just saying no tilling. Say minimum tillage.
Okay.
Try as much as possible not to disturb yourself, because it has its own advantage, the minimum tillage, because you're maintaining biodiversity. You're talking about conserving, and even in arsal regions, you actually get a benefit of retaining moisture,
Yes,
and also
yes.
this root turnover that improves your
Okay.
soil
You've gone for the
diversity.
safe answer.
As
Okay,
an
good.
agroecologist, I
Yes,
have to
because we're
lean a
listening.
little bit.
Everybody's listening. Will be listening with intent. Then we don't want them to do zero tillage and come back and say, "But I heard Dr. Alex telling us clearly." No.
Don't cite me.
Okay. So along your journey, which book would you recommend for? I don't want to say for farming enthusiasts. Is there any book that we can read that not a science? Don't make it too scientific, but something that would be a benefit, or give something that can.
I'll probably start by referring you to my publications. You can find them on LinkedIn.
There you go. There you go. So the best way for us to reach you is via LinkedIn.
You can get me through LinkedIn. I have put links to all my publications and the work that I'm currently doing.
And we'll share that in our newsletter, and you'll give us some of those links.
Precisely.
Yes.
That's
fantastic.
Yeah.
I like that. Somebody who has enough confidence to say that what you can draw inspiration is from what I've written. That's good.
Yeah, exactly.
And we look out to that. And you talk a lot about, you write a lot about the things that you strongly believe about. So
exactly. And if you reach out to me, I will also be happy to share my thesis with you, which is also a very expansive way of demystifying what I'm saying.
Tell us what the title of your thesis was.
It sounds scary, but it's very basic.
We'll figure
my
it out.
thesis is laser-induced breakdown spectroscopy as a new and improved alternative method for soil analysis. I told you.
Listeners, I'm not even going to dare try to repeat what he said, but you're going to be able to read about that. So we look and your thesis is also now in the public domain?
Yes.
Fantastic. Alex, thank you so much for your time. It's been very enlightening.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, sir. There you have it. We've just come to the end of a very interesting and educative episode of the Accidental Farmer podcast, where you had Dr. Alex Njugi tell us the importance of soil health, agroecology, and many other things. We look forward to having you again next time on the Accidental Farmer podcast, where we will have another exciting guest. Stay tuned.